I'm going to give you actually a quick 5-minute important lesson about Islam in order for you to understand clearly what this conflict, what we're dealing with, and what the outcome. The Sunnis and the Shiites have been fighting for 1,000 years. The Shiites are the descendants of Prophet Muhammad, and they believe they are the rightful heirs to lead the Islamic world because they are the blood relatives of Muhammad. The Sunnis were the advisors of Muhammad who do not come from his bloodline, but because they feel they were more qualified to lead the Islamic Ummah after Prophet Muhammad died, that's why they led. And this is why you see this rift between the two of them. But in order for you to understand a little bit about, and I'm going to stand up so you all can see me about this, this is very important. I'm going to give you a little bit of history about Islam. Islam, Prophet Muhammad got his revelation in the early 600s. From the angel Gabriel, who told him that he was supposed to be the last of the prophet. Muhammad tried to preach in his own city of Mecca, trying to recruit people into his own religion, and failed for 12 years. He could not recruit anybody except for his immediate family and friends. So he decided, if I go to Medina, which was the Jewish hub at the time, the Jewish commercial center of Arabia, if I go to the Jews and appeal to them, and if they accept me, that will give me credibility in front of my own people. So Prophet Muhammad, to make his religion more palpable to the Jews, borrowed a lot from the Old Testament, from the Bible. And this is why you see a lot of similarities between the Bible and the Quran. This is why you see Jews don't eat pigs, Muslims don't eat pigs. Jews pray a few times a day, Muslims pray a few times a day. Jews wash their hands before prayers, Muslims wash their hands before prayers. Jews fast for Yom Kippur, Muslims fast for Ramadan. So Muhammad put all that into the Bible, called them the people of the book and all of that, and went to Medina trying to appeal to them. When the Jews refused to accept him, that's when Muhammad turned against them and became a military warrior and started killing them and massacring them. He made the Christians and the Jews second-class citizen, or dhimmi. They either converted to Islam or paid the jizya or the protection tax or died. So when you see ISIS today in Iraq asking people to either pay the jizya, convert, or die, and then they behead them, ISIS is not doing anything that Prophet Muhammad himself did not do. So Christians and Jews became a second-class citizen under Islam, under Muhammad. Christians and Jews could not pray publicly, could not build churches, Jews could not blow the shofar, Christians could not ring the church bells. And they started conquering and went all the way into Jerusalem. By 1090, the Pope in Rome told the Christians, how could you sit idly by and see what's happening to your brethren in Jerusalem? That's why the Crusaders were launched. The Crusaders were launched to liberate Jerusalem. They were able to go liberate Jerusalem for less than 100 years before Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi captured the city back, Saladin. And Jerusalem remained under Islamic control until 1967, when the State of Israel liberated Jerusalem, and where Christians, Jews, and Muslims were able to pray under the same sky. Islam continued to spread. They went out of Arabia, they went all the way to central China, they went to India, they went into Central Europe, and as they conquered nations, only the Christians and the Jews were allowed to stay alive if they paid the jizya or the protection tax. All others were massacred and beheaded. Islam killed 270 million Hindus. This is why the Hindus and the Sikhs have such history with Islam. Islam looked at Jews and Christians as dhimmi, and they gave them identifying clothing so they can identify them as they walk down the street. The yellow star is an Islamic invention for the Jews, not a Nazi invention. The yellow star was invented in Iraq in the 9th century by Khalif al-Mutawakkil, the second Khalif of Iraq, to identify the Jews as they walked down the street. But because the Nazis and the Muslims worked together very closely, the Nazis borrowed the practice from Islam. All you men sitting wearing a belt, this is called a zunnar. That's what the Muslims invented for the Christians in the 9th century, to identify them as they walked down the streets. Jews had the yellow star, Christians had the belt or the zunnar. Islam continued to grow. At one point, Islam covered more of the earth's surface than the Roman Empire did at its peak. Between the 1600s and the 1800s, the Europeans were experiencing the European Industrial Revolution. This is when they started making products on factory lines and selling those products in mass, which gave them a lot of money. Europeans took that money to invest it in an army, put an army together, and stop the Islamists at the gates of Vienna on 9/11. Osama bin Laden did not pull the number 9/11 out of a hat. 9/11 is a huge symbolic point of when the Islamic Empire began deteriorating, when the Christian European fighting armies stopped them at the gates of Vienna. The Christian armies were able to kick the Islamists all the way out of Europe, out of different areas, drive them all the way to North Africa and the Middle East. As the Islamic Empire shrunk, as the money shrunk with Christian lands being liberated, that's when Islamic basically disappeared. By 1924, the Islamic Empire ended. And by the time it ended, it had ruled for 1400 years. So this is our short, we have no knowledge of history in this country. People think World War II is ancient history. So when we're watching ISIS or Al-Qaeda, or the Muslim Brotherhood, or Lashkar-Taiba in India, or Al-Shabaab in Sudan, or Boko Haram in Nigeria, what brings them all together is they are united to establish the caliphate. See, we are only a 300-year-old country. They have ruled the earth for 1400 years and lost it less than 100 years ago. That's what they want to resurrect. Israel or no Israel, Israel could disappear from the earth tomorrow. They want to conquer everything that used to be Islamic, and that's what we are facing in the world today.
Thank you, Brigitte. We have time for one more question.
Great question. He said, how linked Israel's security to our security? And very linked. We have a saying in Arabic that we all know as children growing up in the Middle East. أولاً يأتي السبت وبعده الأحد. First comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. Meaning first we kill the Jews, then we come for the Christians. Every child raised in the Middle East, whether you are a Muslim or a Christian, know that saying, and we all know what it means. We as Christians from our side, the Jews from their side, and the Muslims from their side. What starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews, and especially when it comes to Islam. We are the bullseye. Remember, Ayatollah Khomeini said, Israel is the little Satan. We are the big Satan. Israel is just happened to be closer to them. Israel is not a superpower as we are. Israel is in the Middle East, in the heart of the Middle East, and this is why they're picking on Israel. But they're not going to stop with Israel. As a matter of fact, when Jewish blood was being shed on the streets of Jerusalem and Christian blood was being shed on the streets of Beirut, nobody in the rest of the world gave a care. The world did not wake up until September 11th when they came here to attack us. So now, unless we stand with Israel and defend Israel, we are going to be next. And here's an example about Israel. Remember, Saddam Hussein was developing a nuclear reactor back in 1981, 82. Israel bombed that nuclear reactor. And do you know that was the only time in history where the United States, the first time in history, the first time sadly, that the United States voted against Israel at the UN and condemned Israel? Can you imagine what type of war we would have had with Saddam Hussein when he invaded Kuwait in 1990-91 if Israel did not destroy his nuclear reactor? This is why we need to stand with Israel. Israel is our stationary aircraft carrier in the Middle East. It's our eyes and ears in the Middle East. It's the only democracy in the Middle East, and we have to stand with and support Israel, period.
I'm proud to be an American.